All right, everyone. I appreciate you all for tuning in. Today is actually a special episode. This is actually our first recording under Journey to a Million. I have been recording under the Wealth Building Educator, and my wife and I have decided to take this channel into another direction and basically focus on our journey together to $1 million net worth. And today I have a very, very special guest. I have Mr. Dan Sheeks, who is the owner and founder of SheeksFreaks LLC, which is an online community that is dedicated to helping young people live their best lives by making smart money decisions. He is also the author to the book First to a Million, which is a teenager's guide to achieving early financial independence. Dan Sheeks, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing well, Rashad. Thanks for having me, and congrats on the rebrand. I definitely like the Journey to a Million YouTube channel brand. It's similar to First to a Million, so I think we're thinking alike there.
Yeah, man, it's something different. I think that for a while we focused on educators, but now we're really focusing on everybody, just to let everybody know, if you are a manager at Walmart, you are a police officer, a firefighter, an educator, you have the option, you have the ability to become a millionaire, just by doing simplistic things every day when it comes to finances. And somebody like you to have on a channel really, I think, is a great head start because you focus so much on the 15 to 25-year-old age bracket. So if you can kind of tell me how you got started with your journey and allow the listeners to hear your story, I would love to hear that.
Sure. Yeah. I'll kind of keep some of the details out and kind of get through quick, but so it probably all started about 7-8 years ago when I met my wife, my now wife. We met back then, and at that time we were both just getting started into real estate investing. I had one property, she had a couple, but I will give her credit. She was wiser and more experienced than I in the real estate investing world. And when we met, we also found the Bigger Pockets community and the Choose FI community at that time. And we kind of just dove in, went down that rabbit hole of early financial independence, as well as real estate investing. And so over the last 7 to 8 years, we did get engaged and married, and now we have a kid, but we've also been growing our net worth using the strategies that fall under those umbrellas of early financial independence and real estate investing. And then along that journey, I've been a high school teacher for 20 years. I love working with young people. And like you said, 15 to 25, that's my niche. That's kind of where I live all day, every day. And so it just became really obvious to me that I need to put something out into the universe about these very different strategies of early financial independence in real estate, specifically for Gen Z, which is 15 to 25 today. And so that's where the idea of the book came, and that's where the idea of the online community came from. And so the community's been around for, it's about 3 years now, actually. And the book came out about a year ago. Book and the workbook. Actually, there's 2 books in that series. So just kind of trying to give back as best I can. My wife and I are very fortunate, very blessed, and trying to help young people live their best lives.
So speaking of young people, what was your financial upbringing like?
Yeah, I would say probably pretty typical in that money and investing and net worth and income were never discussed in my household. I was growing up, I think, like the vast majority of people, to believe that money was a taboo subject, and it's something that you kind of kept secret in your household, or even really personally. I think a lot of people don't even share their financial situation with their closest relatives, and sometimes even their kids, right? Like my mom didn't really talk much about our financial situation at home. Now, I did grow up in a lower middle class family with a single mom. It was my mom, my sister, and myself growing up in a small town in Iowa. So we did not have much, but we weren't in poverty. We had enough to be safe and happy, but money was a stress sometimes. And even through high school and through college, I still didn't know really anything about the personal finance basics. It was only when I got out into the real world, and it was trial by fire, right? Which I think is the story for most people as well, that no one really teaches us about personal finance, even just the basics, right? And then we just kind of have to figure it out while making a lot of crucial mistakes along the way once we get out into the real world. And so that's kind of where that was my path, I guess.
Yeah, and I like what you said, and I compare it to the school of hard knocks. Like, you just get out there and you have to live your life, and you have to make these mistakes. But then some people, unfortunately, their mistakes, they make too many mistakes, and they get too deep into debt. And by the time they realize they have a problem, they might be 35, 40 years old. And it's just such a deep hole to dig out of by that time. So I think that allowing 15 to 25-year-olds, even younger than 15, to have that space to where they can learn about finances, I think that's huge. And what you are doing for the community is amazing. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the Sheiks Freaks?
Yeah, the online community, so I mentioned it's about 3 years old, and that's kind of true, kind of not. So I think it was December of 2019, I started a blog site, right? And I, with just the intention of writing some articles, putting it out there on the internet specifically for young people. It's always been about Gen Z, to teach them about early financial independence and some real estate topics that they're not getting anywhere else, right? So that was the original intention, was to build a blog site. I had no idea that it would evolve over time into what it is today. It's been just kind of a progression over the last almost 3 years. And so the website was the first component, the blog site. And I named it Sheiks Freaks because, well, one, it rhymes, so it's a little bit memorable, but I have always said that if you are young and you also think about your financial future, to a point where you're motivated enough to read an article, read a book, listen to a podcast, etc., then that is very unique. That is different. Most young people, they do not think about money at all, except for like, how much do I have that I can spend today, kind of thing. And that's something that, we're all trying to change, but it's just a fact that young people don't spend too much time thinking about their financial future. So they're freakish, they're different, they're exceptional. So that's where the freak theme has come from. And it's a theme that's in the book and the workbook as well. So Sheiks Freaks started that website, the blog site that eventually grew. We went through a couple iterations of the website, kind of leveling up the website to where it is today. The SheeksFreaks.com website is still out there. It has tons of great resources, specifically for young people who are interested in these concepts. But somewhere along the line, it was probably about 2 years ago, I talk to many young people about these things because I love doing that. Lots and lots of phone calls I've had over the last 2 or 3 years, dozens and dozens. And on one of those calls, I was talking to a member. His name was Leo. Well, at the time he wasn't a member. I was talking to this young person, Leo, and he said, because I mentioned that I've been talking to other young people like him that are also interested in these things. And he said, I'd love to connect with them. You should start some kind of a platform where we could all get together. And I said, that's a great idea. So we ended up using Slack in the beginning, and I created a Slack account specifically for the Sheiks Freaks members to come into. It was totally free. And that we grew up to about 150 members. And there was engagement, and I could really see there was some value there and a need for that. So I made the decision to move out of Slack, because Slack was good, but it wasn't quite the right fit for us. Mm-hmm. To move out of Slack into a new platform, which I then developed with a team. I hired a team to help me out. And so that platform is called Buddy Boss, but it's kind of a template you can customize to your own liking. So there's the website, and there's an app now for the community, only for members who are in Gen Z. And so we now have two websites. There's the website Sheiks Freaks for everybody. Then there's their community website, which is only for members, and the app is only for members as well. And so it's continued to grow. And it's a lot of fun for me to watch young people come together who are meeting other young people that are as motivated as they are. Because when they meet each other and connect with each other and engage with each other, it's like, I kind of always say, it's like pouring gasoline on a fire. It just erupts, right? They finally have found their squad, and they hold each other accountable. They cheer each other on, and they can see someone a couple steps ahead of them, the same age, right? A couple steps ahead of them doing it. So then they're like, well, if that guy does it, I can do it. Or if she's doing it, I can do it. So it's really fun for me to watch kind of as they progress. And a lot of the young members in the community are buying properties, are having successful side hustles. They have extremely successful social media brands that they've built. So it's working, and it's a lot of fun.
Okay, and that sounds great. I definitely want to get into the whole real estate aspect in a little bit, kind of piggybacking on what you were saying about the young investors and the young people who are on their journey to $1 million. I think that it's important to understand, like, there's a spectrum of intelligence when it comes to wealth building, and that goes for adults and for kids. So, you have kids they don't care. And, you and I got connected by J.L. Collins, and he talks all the time about how his daughter she did not care about finances. She just, put it in BTSAX and let it ride out. Whatever happens, happens. How do you go about educating young people and not turning them off from the concept of money? Because I have 3 kids, and I have 2 that are really into it, and they look forward to having these conversations. I have one who's just like, oh, I don't want to hear about money anymore, Dad. So how do you balance that out?
So it's not easy, right? So I have kind of 2 worlds. I have my classroom world, right? Because I have taught personal finance as a class in the past. I'm not teaching it this year. I hope to be back to teaching it again next year. And so I have students in my classroom. Then I have members in my community, and those are very different groups, because the members in my community are already engaged and motivated in their financial future, but the ones in my classroom aren't necessarily. And so, well, I'll go back to what you said about J.L. Collins, right? Here's one of the smartest, most intelligent money men out there. His book is amazing, The Simple Path to Wealth. And even his kids, right, struggled and were standoffish around learning about money. And so I always go back to this. You can't make a young person do anything. You can't make anyone do anything they don't want to do, right? And teenagers are no different. And so what helps me sleep at the end of the day is that in my classroom, I deliver the information, and it's not a hard sell. I mean, even young people know that the basic personal finance topics and strategies are things that they should know. They understand that they're going to be using those every day of their life, and it's going to help them. Unlike some other classes they might take in high school or college, personal finance is a class that almost everyone says, yeah, this is important, and I probably should pay attention. This is stuff that's going to help me personally in my future. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to engage with it and take action today, though. And so what helps me sleep at night is I know I'm giving them the right information. I know I'm planting that seed, but I don't get to choose when that seed blossoms. I can incentivize and motivate, and I try to do that to the best of my ability. But at the end of the day, either that young person is ready to take action or they're not. And if they're not, it doesn't mean that you or I have failed or a parent has failed. It just means they're not ready. Yep. Their journey is going to look a little different. Maybe they need to go through 5 or 10, 15 years of financial struggle before they're ready to take action. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Everyone's path is the way it's supposed to be. But I know that if it is 10, 20, 30 years down the road, and that my former student is now struggling, or they're in a job that they maybe just really, really don't like, that seed has been planted, and it may blossom at that point. And they may say, you know what, I don't like where I'm at financially right now, but I remember what that YouTuber, that teacher, that podcaster said. Let me go Google it now. I'm ready to take action now. And so J.L. Collins, is a good example. His daughter, when she was a teenager, wasn't ready to take action. I think now in her adult life, she has, right? She's doing some really smart financial things. I'm guessing. I don't know her personally, but we don't get to choose when they take action, but we can educate them now so that they have the tools, or at least the seed has been planted when they are ready to take action.
Those are great points. I mean, you made some phenomenal points. Even with my kids, I make them save or invest 50% of everything they get. So my son, he started working at 15 last year. He has probably $2,000 in his Roth IRA at 16. And then my other, 2 kids, they have approximately $1,500 in their UTMA account. So I just let them know, hey, I think it was a graphic I saw from, the Money Guy. And I think $1 turns into $88 in 45 years. So I just tell them, hey, every dollar you spend at Dollar Tree on candy, that could be $88 in 45 years. So and so now they come to me like, Dad, hey, can you put this in my Fidelity or Vanguard account? So it's
awesome.
But now I'm at the point where I step back a little bit and I'm allowing them to come to me to invest and not trying to force them to invest. So
yes.
So when, let's go back to J.L. Collins, and, we all take bits and pieces from various financial personalities. So you mentioned personal finance, and I tell people all the time, personal finance is personal. That's the key word in personal finance. And, I think that everyone's familiar with Dave Ramsey. He will completely disagree with some of the things you teach, such as using authorized users or putting children on authorized users' credit card. And I just want to, if you could speak a little bit about how you piece together different parts, because he's big into real estate, and then J.L. Collins is not a big fan of real estate. But then J.L. Collins is, he has a simple path to wealth, which is like simple investing. If you can just do broad-based index funds, and Dave Ramsey has the 4 funds that he recommends, mutual funds. So just if you could speak a little bit about how you take bits and pieces from various financial gurus. Sure.
Yeah. So Dave Ramsey, very smart guy. And I think his message through and through is what is very right for the majority of Americans. And I think he's done a lot of good with that message in his courses, in his program. But I don't agree with everything. It comes down to this. What are your goals? Like personal finance is personal, as you mentioned. So when you sit down with one person, their goals are going to be different than probably everyone else. So what are your financial goals? And the answer to that question changes the strategies. And so Dave Ramsey's one size fits all. It fits most, but it doesn't fit all. And so my book and my community are for the very exceptional, this is why I call them freaks, young people who are so motivated to learn about to maximize their financial future that they would do something like read a book about money when they're young. And so their strategy can and should look different than the average person who doesn't want to spend any time. So my book talks about taking on debt, good debt, not bad debt, but good debt. Mm-hmm. Dave Ramsey is against all debt. And I don't know Dave Ramsey, but from what I gather from his YouTube videos and stuff, that's what he says. All debt is bad. Don't have any debt ever. But if you want to maximize your financial future, debt is a leverage tool that you absolutely should utilize, but in an intelligent way. And so, for instance, I do invest in real estate. My wife and I would not be anywhere close to where we are with that successful portfolio without taking on debt, or financing those properties. And it's debt I would take all day long. If I can take out debt and the debt service, the interest rate on that debt is more than made up for by the cash flow from the property, then that's a smart investment all day long, all things being equal. So I think Dave Ramsey's message is great for adults who really struggle with money, who have dug themselves into a really deep hole with bad debt, credit card debt, consumer debt, student loan debt, etc. But for those who want to reach early financial independence, using good debt to leverage yourself now to get there earlier is a tool they definitely should use. J.L. Collins, I wouldn't say he's anti-real estate. I just think he's very, very heavy on passive index fund investing, which is something that my wife and I do as well. I don't think he would say don't do real estate. I think he would just say make sure you do it intelligently, buy the right properties after analyzing, and only buy when you're educated on how real estate investing works. And so, yeah, I think to sum it up, everyone's journey is personal. And for those small percentage, that niche of people who are willing to hammer it and to learn and focus on their financial future, then taking on debt. And so if you are going to take on debt, you need a good credit score. And the best way to build a good credit score is to use credit cards. And if you can start your credit history earlier than 18 by becoming an authorized user in your parents' credit card, then let's do that. Whereas Dave Ramsey would say, just don't ever use credit cards. So.
Yeah, and just to go back on what you said about JL, I agree with you 100%. He's not against that. I think that I'm sorry, he's not against your real estate. I think that he wants you to own real estate and not have your real estate own you. And you're absolutely correct there. And when you talk about the credit cards, I can recall being in LaGuardia Airport, and I was behind a young lady who had a debit card trying to rent a car, and she was there I was behind her probably 35 minutes. They had to make about 10 phone calls to confirm her identity and just all kind of foolishness. I was like, somebody else finally came. I took my credit card up there, and I was out in 5 minutes, and I just paid that off as soon as I got back home. So I said, I'm not a one size fits all kind of guy. I think that you have to just use sense and implement your strategies. Like you said, if you can have an authorized user on a card, they're getting all of the credit history of that. And that doesn't mean you go out there and run credit up. Hey, if you want to charge a pack of gum every month, fine. That's going to build your credit history up, you know?
Yep.
So, hey, why don't you speak a little bit? I know you talk about frugality and, delayed gratification. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because if you have a young person that is watching this video later on, what do you believe about frugality and delayed gratification?
Yeah. So I'll go back to something you said, Rashad, that I really liked, telling your kids that if you save $1 today, it's $88 40 years from now. Right. And so that's kind of the basis of frugality, is that if you can save a little more now, meaning spending less or earning more, but if you can save more now, it's going to multiply and compound over time, and it's going to pay you massive dividends in your future life. So you're helping your future self out. So frugality, a lot of people are standoffish around frugality because it can lend to the vibe that you are depriving yourself, but that's not the point. Frugality is about spending money only on things you value and not on things you don't. And some people think that, they get frugality and the word cheap confused, right?
Yes.
They think they're the same, but they're not. Someone who's cheap says, I don't spend money on anything. Someone who's frugal says, I spend money on things I value, but not on other things. And when I spend money on things I value, sometimes I spend lavishly. We deserve to spend money on things we value and enjoy life. And, spending money is fun, but we shouldn't spend money on things we don't value. For example, I live in Colorado and I love to mountain bike. I have a very expensive mountain bike that some people would look at me and say, why would you ever spend that much money on a mountain bike? That's a waste of money. But for me, I value that. But I don't value really nice clothing or really nice restaurants. So my wife and I do not spend money on those things. And that's where we save. Now you could flip it. If you value the restaurants, but not the bike, then do that. But frugality is about, the idea that don't spend everything you make or even close. But in our society, we're told that we deserve to spend everything we make. So if we make $50,000 a year, then we deserve to spend $50,000 a year. If we make $100,000 a year, we deserve to spend 100. If we make $1 million, we deserve to spend $1 million. So you're not saving anything for your future self, but you're having a lot of fun spending the money in the present. So that delayed gratification is just an understanding of, if I can save more now while still being happy, only spending money on things I value, then in the future, that is going to pay off with, maybe I can retire 10 years earlier or 20 years earlier. And how do you put a price on your future time, especially when you're going to be doing things like spending time with your kids or your grandkids or traveling the world? So it's a trade-off, and there's no right answer to that, by the way. People who spend everything they make, they're probably going to work till age 65 or longer. And if they're okay with that, then go for it. There's nothing wrong with that path. But most people don't understand that if they widen their savings rate or they increase their savings rate by being frugal, saving and investing now, that they could have decades of their time back later in life. Instead of 65, maybe it's 45. And if that's the option you want, then go for that one. If it's not, then that's fine too.
Man, I love what you said. I have decided with my wife to spend money on experiences. We're going on these cruises and vacations, and it's nothing, we don't regret it. In 2016, we took the kids to Disney World. It was my first time there. It was their first time there. And I can't even remember how much it cost. It might've been around $4,000, but who cares? Like, that's something they'll always remember when they're 90 years old. And, when I'm on my deathbed, I'll remember that trip to Disney World. So it leads me to a concept I learned about maybe 2 years ago, and it was the Hedonic Treadmill. And I don't know if you know much about the hedonic treadmill, but it kind of goes along exactly what you're saying, you know, and when we are spending money on things, we need to look at the aspect, whether or not it's going to provide happiness long term. Are we going to buy this $500,000 house and then we are going to be happy for about a month or two, and then we're going to be stuck with this mortgage for 360 months? Or are we going to buy something that provides us a lifetime of happiness? And once we realize that buying things don't necessarily provide us with happiness long term, it's going to wear off. Once we understand that concept, then it can really save a lot of money in our pockets, you know, and allow us to spend money on things that really do bring us joy. So I really appreciate you bringing that up, man. I really do.
Yeah, I would say you were being frugal when you spent $4,000 on your vacation to Disneyland because it was something you valued. And you're exactly right. Something your kids will never forget. You can live in a frugal world and still spend money on those things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think so people think when you look at the concept of minimalism, it's just about being cheap and just cutting everything out your life. But it really is cutting out the things that don't bring you happiness and don't bring you joy. So,
yes,
man, it's a great conversation. I can go on all day, man. So I have a buddy, his name is Marcus, his wife is Shira, and they have the YouTube channel Black Married Debt Free. And they have, I think, about 18 doors now. They invest in a lot of out-of-state real estate. And I have played around with the idea. I'm just a little afraid, apprehensive. I throw a lot of money into index funds. Why don't you tell us about how many doors you have and about the I think it's BRRR strategy?
Yeah. Well, first, real estate investing is not for everybody. Entrepreneurship is not for everybody. Having a YouTube channel is not for everybody. There's nothing wrong with simply using low-cost index funds, the JL Collins strategy, and not investing in real estate. But real estate can get you to early financial independence faster. But don't do it if you have zero interest in it. Then I'm not talking to you specifically, but your listeners. If you have zero interest in real estate and it feels like an awful thing to you, then don't touch it. Find some other way to invest. But my wife and I do love real estate, and we love what it does for our net worth. We have 17 doors, so very similar to your friend. Most are in Colorado, where we live. We have a few out of state in Michigan. We've bought 3 houses in Michigan, in a suburb of Detroit called Wayne, Michigan. And each of those we BRRRR. And that's a strategy that honestly, it was working really well for investors in the last 7 to 8 years, but it's kind of waned off a little bit. You can still find success with it. But the last couple of years, things have changed a bit. But people are still doing it very successfully. So it's the idea that you're going to buy a property, let's say a house, like we did, but it needs a lot of work. It's pretty run down, and it might need it needs a lot of work. And so you buy it, you rehab it, which is then you put some more money into making it a rentable property, a safe, clean, rentable property. And then you rent it out. So you put a tenant in there, and they're starting to pay you some rent. And then you go to the bank and you say, I have this property. I want to refinance it. Or as the case usually is, I want to finance it, because BRRRRs, the best way to use a strategy is you buy the property cash and you fund the rehab with cash. Now that could be cash that you've borrowed from a private lender or hard money lender. My wife and I were doing it just cash, because we were buying properties in Detroit for like 60 grand and another 30 grand in rehab. So we're all in for 90 grand. So we owned it outright. We went to the bank and said, we want to finance this property. And the bank said, okay, we're going to do an appraisal, see how much it's worth. Well, they did an appraisal, and now it's worth $120,000 because we've increased the value through the rehab. So the bank says this is worth $120,000. We'll lend you up to 80%, 75% of the value. So we're going to finance that for, let's make the numbers easier. Let's say 100 grand. So then they give us 100 grand. Now we have a mortgage payment, but we can take that 100 grand and we can go do another one. That's the repeat. So it's buy, rehab, rent it out, refinance it, and then repeat the process. That's the BRRRR, BRRRR. And so you can continue to use the same money over and over and over again. It does take time. Like it takes at least 6 months or a year to kind of recycle that money, because the bank wants to see a tenant in there for a certain amount of time before they will finance it. And rehabs take a while, it could take 2 months to 6 months to rehab that property. So it's not a fast way to acquire properties, but it can be a great strategy if you want to just recycle that money over and over and over again.
And do you keep utilizing the same bank? Like, have they built that trust with you and you with them? And now it's like, oh, I'll just go back to them and they know I'm successful with it.
Yes, you can do that. We didn't, because at the end of the day, if whatever that property appraises for, most lenders are going to lend you that money, assuming that, so all those houses are in my name and the mortgages are in my name. And I had a full-time W-2 job. So they looked at me and looked at my financial situation and said, your debt to income ratio is solid. We'll lend you $80,000 and let you put a mortgage on this house. There does come a point where, the bank is going to say, we're not going to lend you any more money because your W-2 income doesn't justify you having all this debt. And then you have to go to some other strategies. But, we did 3, no problem, with just my income, not my wife, on the mortgages. And I think we used different lenders just because the rates were better here or there, depending on the year that we did it.
Hey man, that's some great information. I'm going to definitely look a little more into it. I've been toying around with the idea of just trying to obtain my first property. I did actually do a flip a few years ago, and looking back on it, had I held it and rented it out, I would have done so much better.
Yeah.
But I was apprehensive of having a tenant. But it's different ways to wealth, and I think that it's definitely more beneficial to have real estate if you can stomach the idea of having a tenant. So great information, Dan. I really appreciate it. I can be on here all day with you. Some great information. I think we're gonna have to do a part 2, man.
Yeah, I would love to.
So we're gonna have to do a part 2. For now, if you can kind of tell everybody what are the best ways to follow you and to get in touch with you and to buy your book.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for that. Best way to get in touch with me is just send me an email. My email is dan@SheeksFreaks.com, and that's SheeksFreaks.com. All the information about my book, my community, my free resources are on SheeksFreaks.com website. If people want to follow me, Instagram, LinkedIn, Bigger Pockets, and the book is available in hard copy, audio, and digital, Amazon, and at the publisher's website, biggerpockets.com.
Thanks for that information, Dan. And I'll also drop it in the description on the video when it is posted to YouTube. So, hey, I've had an absolute joy interviewing Dan Sheeks today. I really appreciate him spending his time on the platform. And please get in touch with him. Please go buy this book. It will be one of the best things you have ever done for your child. So, hey, Dan, thanks again. I appreciate your time today, buddy.
Thanks, Rashad. Best of luck.
All right. Thanks, man.